Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today we're going to discuss the tricky issue of engaging and winning over communities when planning and delivering new infrastructure projects and policies. Someone once said that a lie can be halfway around the world before the truth's even got its boots on. Well, in today's social media-driven 24-hour news cycle, I'd say that the truth is likely to be even further behind nowadays. So when it comes to engaging with the public to explain the rationale behind infrastructure investment, design and delivery, professionals need to be very aware of this reality, as should politicians. Three recent examples spring to mind. The first, of course, is the HS2 project, hugely controversial from the start, but once named High Speed 2, no amount of public relations effort is ever going to convince detractors that this project is really about capacity. Second is the equally controversial plan to extend London's ultra-low emission zone scheme. Designed to improve air quality, impacting children's health, this policy now seems to be spearheading the anti-green taxation, anti-Extinction rebellion, anti-Joss Stop Oil lobby, and looks set to scupper the UK's efforts to achieve its net zero targets. Finally comes the debate over planning, after the government vowed to give local communities choice and the power to veto projects they don't like, such as onshore wind turbines, about which we're hearing political noise this week that this may well be changed to accelerate the delivery of renewable power. But the debate also covers many other projects, such as the vital new power distribution lines needed to power up the electric cars and heat pumps that government is simultaneously mandating. Is that really a choice local communities should make or be able to make? So navigating this complex, highly emotional and usually very unlevel playing field is difficult, as is getting to the truth behind policies, then explaining it to often polarised communities. And depoliticising decisions around infrastructure investment is really simply impossible. But navigating the route is a vital part of our infrastructure future, which has to be faced if we're to prosper sustainably as a nation. So to discuss this conundrum, my guest today is Martin McCrink, Managing Partner of Communications and Public Engagement Specialist, Copper Consultancy. And Martin has spent a career wading into battles and seeking the vital consensus and compromise required to progress, so ideally placed to discuss this knotty issue today. Martin, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Hi Anthony, thanks for inviting me on. It's a great podcast, really important for our industry, and it's really great to be here and talk to you.
Well, great to see you. Thanks for saying so. Martin, I tried to set the scene and highlight a few of the recent issues facing infrastructure professionals when it comes to the politics of project and policy. Was it a fair summary, or did I over-egg that particular pudding?
No, I think you're about right there. What your summary highlights is the inherent inner conflict in our national thinking around infrastructure. People want the obvious benefits of infrastructure, but that doesn't mean that we will accept the implications when they're specific. We've seen a shift in public sentiment over the last couple of years based on our data. People are more supportive than ever of smaller interventions which directly improve their day-to-day life experience and how they feel about the world. There's actually less appetite for mega projects which they can't relate the benefit to them too. There's also an increased focus in the concept of, well, what about me?
Okay. I mentioned also, when you talk about what about me, I mentioned the latest government proposal we're hearing today, which it intends to lower the planning hurdles for onshore wind. How significant do you think that change is likely to be?
Well, if we go back to 2015, when the ban came in, there was a sense that there were too many onshore wind farms. But if you look at the data, onshore wind and solar are the two most popular ways of generating electricity in the UK. So really it's a debate around a vocal minority that is dictating policy to government. So actually it's an obvious common sense reversion. We all know that's normal in our industry. The challenge we've got is a really good example of the challenge for infrastructure, which is government trying to deal with a perception that everyone's opposed to it, when actually the data shows it's a small group.
Right.
One of the challenges is that people don't tend to stand up and vote for what feels like sensible, not bad ideas. You don't go out and vote for that or campaign for that. And actually our data shows that around 4% of people have ever participated in a planning application, be it attended a planning committee.
That's not very many people at all, is it?
It's tiny. And when you get to the concept of community engagement, it really sounds to us, and what we see from the evidence when we look at public consultation, it's those motivated to respond,
right?
And that dictates the debate. What you don't have is nuance and balance.
So it is slightly ridiculous if one person in a community has the power of veto to stop everything happening.
Well, I think there's another way of looking at it, which is it's also no good just blaming that situation either. There is a question of how hard are we really working to make sure that support is out there? We can't just expect it to be there and say, well, the data says it, because it's an inherently emotional decision, and it's a political decision, not a scientific decision. And our industry is made up of experts who are used to dealing in science and the best evidence they can get. So the idea that there is an emotional response, which is, I don't like it, that doesn't really compute. So in many ways, there's two separate conversations happening, and the loudest one wins in political voices.
Okay, well, we'll get into some of those issues in a moment, but just set the scenes in terms of the role that you play and Copper plays. What do you actually do at Copper to try to smooth that process of helping people understand?
So we're about helping clients and project teams explain their ambitions in a way that audiences can understand, and bring external stakeholders in where that's needed. We help make projects sound human and make them better understood and more likely to be accepted by communities to ease the pressure on developers. That pressure that you get from poorly explained projects, that you end up with political pressure. Okay. And I've got two main roles. For clients, it's about developing and delivering strategies where we need to influence the decision-making process, build support, explain an ambition, change internal perceptions, or help a business transition its story. But fundamentally, we manage the risk that misunderstanding and opposition and loss of control presents to clients. And part of this is using data to make sure we properly understand what our audiences think.
So when you say making projects sound human, that's about just explaining how it matters to communities, how it matters to individuals.
That's right. It's really translating highly technical information into an order and a story that makes sense for those people. It's often, we make an assumption that the public will just grasp all the evidence that we've put together and they will accept all the premises we've put in place. And our job is to really start at the beginning of that story.
Yeah. And are these challenges getting bigger? Are we becoming a more polarised, we are becoming a more polarised society? Presumably that does really make your job harder.
Well, you see it almost every general election. You see a government announcing investment in infrastructure because it's popular. Biden's done it in the US, and fundamentally it's a positive thing. Why? Because it presents progress and change. And yet when we talk about specifics, it becomes really tense. The gap between the promise of infrastructure and the specific plans that individuals hear about, often from sources they trust rather than us, that gap is big. And people hear about, as I say, they hear about chapter 1 of the story at very top level. The next thing they hear is a project. So we go from chapter 1 to chapter 6 really quickly and expect them to fill in the gaps. And that's not fair, actually. And we're surprised that they haven't followed all the processes. So you end up with two scenarios. One, each developer has to tell that story from the very beginning because they need to take people on that journey with them. Or you end up with a confused audience that doesn't grasp what's going on at chapter 6.
Okay. Well, I highlighted 3 examples. Perhaps we can just unpack these and get your view on each of them. The first was the HS2 project. Could this project, in your view, have taken a different path to get greater public buy-in from the start?
It's probably easier to broaden out this than necessarily talk about HS2. I think in reality, major projects will always create a reaction, and there will always be pockets of opposition. There is a question about, when we say opposition, are we measuring noise, number of people, the people that we consider to have political influence? What are we actually measuring when we say opposition? And let's not forget that it's hard to motivate people to support something that's sensible, similar to onshore wind. If somebody looks at a project that looks okay, you don't go out in the streets and campaign for common sense, please. That doesn't happen.
Right. No. You tend to campaign against things negatively rather than positively for them. That's what you...
But there are projects where there is a clear vision and a campaign that resonates with audiences, where a team is fighting hard to win over a broad audience, not just those that are already motivated to give a view. It's hard to quantify this, but it does build purpose and positivity within a team. And this isn't as simple as just whether a project is naturally popular or not. It's about maintaining consistency of a need case, and that's really essential. And that's not HS2, by the way. That's every single project. So I'm definitely not picking HS2. It's a common theme across all projects.
What about my second example then? London's ultra low emission zone scheme. That's now being used as a Trojan horse for stopping investment in low carbon technology. I mean, what's happened there? Could it have been handled in a different way?
So I've got a professional view and a personal view.
I think the person one's going to be more interesting. Let's start with that one.
I'm going to see the professional one first. So I'd say ULEZ is genuinely always a challenge to communicate, because there is an obvious thing that Outer London has a different transport system to Central London. So the nature of that change is going to be different. And it came at a time where political parties needed something to campaign on. The by-election of Uxbridge, the mayor elections coming up, the general election. So timing led to a perfect storm. I think in terms of the lesson, communicating the benefits and addressing the issues early as possible is key to mitigating future risks that may come up. In terms of the message, is it clear where ULEZ money goes and how do people benefit from it? So improving air quality is a really sensible story, but strangely it's not enough to justify the cost, even though it clearly should be. So focusing on the story and what it means for people is key. The original congestion charge made it feel like the charge was about better buses in London. People felt they were getting something from it. There was a clear link. A personal view, I do wonder if the Conservative Party have set quite a smart trap for Labour. The Uxbridge by-election came along, the Conservative Party tapped into a local issue and behaved like they were on the side of the people, and there was a sort of common sense argument, and it forced Labour to say what it thinks about ULEZ. Was it for it? Was it against it? Was it on the fence? But that debate was put in the context of cost and inconvenience, not air quality. Mm-hmm. And that just led to a really simplistic story that worked, rather than one that was actually about the issue, which is air quality.
No, but the reality is, though, it's a decision. You could argue it shows great leadership. Mm-hmm. And I suppose you could say, well, it also highlights the difficulty of leaders making difficult decisions and how quite often there's unintended consequences.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that the result of Uxbridge has opened the door to reject the immediacy around net zero, and it's made it okay to say that we're not ready for change, even though we know it's critical. And again, our own research shows that climate change is not going to be the reason for the next government to win or lose the next election. You can lose it by having a poor opinion on it, but it's not going to be the number one issue. There are plenty of issues that the public right now is saying are higher up the list, which is worrying considering we know how important this is. I suspect ULEZ probably would have been a localised, grumbling, low-key issue had it not been for the Uxbridge by-election. I think it would have been seen as just one of those things that happens, and maybe even to your point, there would have been a perception that there was great leadership there in tackling a thorny issue and getting on with it. And change is unpopular, and it involves impacting communities, and it leads to a human reaction. And in our sector, we're always calling out for leadership. But if you put yourselves in the shoes of a politician, especially in the age of populism where headlines matter and people haven't got time for long-form news, you can see why politicians focus on debates that people want to hear. They're supplying a product rather to respond to that demand rather than shaping the demand. And you can argue that the amount of polling data leads to those decisions because you're looking to win rather than be right. But we've got to take responsibility too. It's easy to blame lack of leadership. But if we take the world as we see it, does our industry do enough to make our sector a vote-winning issue?
Right. Well, that's a very interesting point. I suppose, there are many, many really, really good ideas which simply don't feature on the political debate because they're just too difficult. They're too difficult. No one wants to go near them. But I suppose it leads us to the final issue around planning. I mean, is this simply a case of politicians failing or being unwilling to show that leadership, in those difficult situations?
I think there's an opportunity for politicians to create a legacy around infrastructure, but they're not going to do that unless it's universally popular. So we can't just say, show leadership. We've got to make it as politically saleable as possible, and to assume that we're not in a political environment. And I mean that from macro policy down to every single decision that's taken on the ground. To assume that's ever happening in not that environment is naive. We have to assume that we're only as good as our last piece of work we've done, and we've got to make sure that that we have to assume that the last thing the politician's seen is the best that industry has.
Right. So if they're not able to make those decisions, we need to work harder as a profession to sell those to politicians and explain them to politicians so that they can make those decisions, which are difficult.
I think that's right in the world as it is. I'm not saying that's an ideal world, but in the world that we live in right now, we probably have to deal with what's in front of us,
right,
which is to make those issues saleable.
Okay. I use the words truth. Is there really any truth, any real truth that can be agreed upon when it comes to the benefits or disbenefits of public infrastructure investment, or is it all just highly nuanced?
I think truth is a bit of a misleading idea here. Because both camps are right. So let me paint a scenario. There's a need to upgrade infrastructure, and people are also concerned. And both of those things are facts at the same time.
Right.
Balancing that viewpoint is the challenge. And there is another challenge in this, that the sector, our industry, has a higher bar to reach when communicating facts, what we consider to be facts or our view, whereas campaigners don't have that. There's no comeback doing that. We've never worked on a project or seen anybody set out to lie on a project. That's not how it works. What does happen is a clash of ideas and situations where maybe an expected result wasn't exactly as planned, but that doesn't mean truth was missing. We've all worked on enough projects to know that they're packed full of experts who are detail-focused and really committed to telling the truth and being correct. Yeah. And that's hugely reassuring, but it's not actually enough to win over the public, media and political support. We don't spend enough time explaining the benefits that matter to people, but instead we believe that being robust is enough. So we've looked at this through polling, and the public trusts our industry. It really does, but it doesn't hear from us enough. So we need to make sure we do this more, and not just when we want something, not just when it's about proposing change or when we've got an application. It lacks empathy, and if I'm honest, it lacks self-awareness, if nothing else. So we can't expect anyone else to make us look trustworthy. We've got to do it ourselves.
No, but it's interesting because we also hear a great deal about having honest debate, and you talked about having honest debates and open consultations. Let's hear more from this sector, But to what extent is the public now, I suppose, too cynical to believe that the views expressed in consultations are actually listened to by professionals, by politicians, by whoever it is that they're responding to?
I think the word consultation is a problem. It means different things to different people. It means something like, we have some plans, we think they're great, tell us if we missed anything, to a developer. Yeah,
no, but to some people it means basically this is a fait accompli I'm presenting you with, like it or lump it.
That's right. And to some people it's a waste of time. To others it's an expectation that they are going to veto the project. Good consultation is where genuine concerns are understood and a project is changed to address what's been said. But this isn't actually about consultation. This is about early, meaningful engagement that's not transactional. The other challenge is it's part of the consenting process. So it's really easy just to interpret the Planning Act and do what it says, but that's the bare minimum of what's required to be legally compliant. It's not an aspiration. So my view is that if we're relying on consultation to explain our project and build support, we're probably missing the point. Just following planning guidance is naive, and at worst it brings more risk on your project. Consultation should be, in my view, a short period which needs to be undertaken, not a basket to put all your eggs in if you're hoping to create long-term diversified support. And let's be honest, public consultation in village halls is made up of a very small demographic, usually time-rich, and those that are already motivated to tell a promoter what they already think. It's done because it's implicitly set in so many examples, and it's how it's done before. And it does take the sting out of a project, and does allow people to get it off their chest at the promoter, and it also makes sure that conversation happens with a promoter, not at the media or a politician. Yeah. But I do think it helps to, and it also helps to show that promoters are willing to front up their project to the people that are most likely to oppose them. But nowhere near enough is done to actually understand the communities we aspire to talk to, let alone engage them.
Yeah, no, obviously it is a fascinating and a hugely tricky issue. And you've been at Copper Let's talk about you. I mean, you've been at COPPA for a decade, and your background is in communications and public engagement. I suppose dealing with this kind of thing constantly. You've worked in some pretty controversial projects, and some projects in controversial sectors such as the nuclear sector. I mean, what gets you excited about this tricky process of engaging the public?
I think what I really enjoy the most is, and it's particularly why I enjoy communications in this sector, is that you can work on a project where you can see a tangible change that is the right answer for the country.
Right.
And I think working in communications, there's a really broad industry, and a lot of people, particularly going out of leaving education, or even people that are looking at changing from different sectors, might not think infrastructure and communications. They might more think about influencers at Formula One and how do I run campaigns to sell more Mars bars or something. And I can see why that's interesting and glamorous, but it doesn't deliver change. Whereas this is what gets me out of bed, is the fact that we can actually change something in its material.
And what would you say were your greatest successes then? I mean, is it about delivering projects that were really hard, or is it about just getting across a message which was understood? I mean, how do you define your successes?
I think success is often a blunt word in what we do, because it's so full of nuance, and it's really got
because there's always people who are going to be really upset on the other side of the debate. Yeah,
it's a grey area. I think success for us comes in really shifting public sentiment towards a project that is the right thing to do, or there are also projects that you kind of instinctively in your gut are exciting, they're big, they're national, they're really important, and they are motivating to be on because they are critical that you get everything right. And we've worked on projects, for example, the Stonehenge Tunnel, where you're under international scrutiny every single day from all different types of, viewpoints. And that was really motivating to get planning consent for that recently. Okay. And I think for us as a business, it was exciting for us that we were actually able to make a contribution. So John Armick quoted some of our research when the NIC was set up quite a few years ago, and framed it as evidence where infrastructure is for the people, rather than projects that just need to be built.
I mean, would you ever consider, for example, campaigning on an issue personally, rather than professionally? I mean, do you go out there campaigning for issues that really, really kind of drive you?
We kind of inherently do it every day on things that matter. So the business is constantly campaigning on renewable energy projects and decarbonising. Right. And for me, I think...
those are kind of, you would consider them to be sort of personal to your business because that's what your business believes in.
Yeah, and it's helpful actually in our recruitment strategy that people join the business because they care, not just because they're turning up. I've campaigned for candidates in a general election before, and I think everyone actually should do that. I think it's a really useful thing to talk to people about the issues that really matters to them. But we do need more people to stand up for developments that will make our economy more sustainable. And without this, we will just continue to have imbalanced debates.
You're talking to me today from Bristol. I mean, how do you relax to take your mind off work? I mean, what do you do in your downtime?
So at the weekend, my daughter and I, we head outdoors somewhere. She's 3, so seeing the world through the eyes of a 3-year-old is pretty amazing. Actually, you can go to the woods, a park, do some cooking, you name it. All those kind of things are really exciting, and I feel at the moment there's nothing that's not new or interesting. So that's really fun. I play tennis about once a week as well.
Oh, right.
And I enjoy it. It's satisfying. The other good thing about it is you can't play tennis if you're not concentrating. And tennis is basically problem solving and creativity. And it's great for clearing your mind. And despite the fact you have to focus on tennis, work becomes so much clearer in the middle of a match, even though you're focusing on what you need to do. And you find yourself, if you are not concentrating, the scoreboard will tell you. So it's quite a good way of, just be in the room,
Are you a singles player or a doubles player? Because I was thinking, if a singles player is very, very, it's all about your own performance, whereas a doubles player, it's more about the social game. Where are you? Where are you in your tennis at the moment?
It's both, for both reasons. So singles, I find, is more practices with people that I know, because it does require you to just completely switch off. The the doubles, what I love is the creativity and the problem solving. And I think it's always, when you watch Wimbledon, doubles is fantastic to watch because there's so many variables at play and there's so much unpredictability that needs to be dealt with. And it's such a, I don't know, I think it's a beautiful game to watch as well. I think it's great. When it's done well, it's beautiful.
Well, I'm sure that it's done very well in your particular case, Martin. Back to the politics of infrastructure. I mean, what would you say is the role of politicians in driving infrastructure investment decisions? I mean, building on that, I mean, are they doing a good enough job?
Having worked for an MP, I don't subscribe to the idea that they're all bad and don't care and only in it for themselves. I mean, there are probably pockets of that, but I don't think it's the norm. I think the positive way to answer this is that there is a huge opportunity for politicians to build legacies around infrastructure. And we've worked with some great MPs on projects who have worked really hard to try and build support, and they've worked really hard to deal with local concerns without being reactionary. They've been really helpful, and they can see that their job is to deliver progress, not just pick a side. If I could ask politicians to do one thing, it would be brave. We need their help to advocate progress, and just or only reflecting local concerns because it's easy in politics doesn't really get us anywhere.
Right.
Again, we need to look at ourselves. Are we making it as easy for politicians as we could do? Are we handing them a problem and expecting them just to be leaders on it when we can see that they've got majorities to worry about? Mm-hmm. Lacking that empathy on our part, I think, is naive.
Okay. What about organisations such as Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion? I mean, they're key in the whole political environment now. I mean, are they a good thing in terms of raising debate? Are they good things in terms of creating policy change?
I grew up in Stroud, Gloucestershire, so you could argue that environmental campaigning is part of my DNA. But looking at their cause, I think it's inevitable. It's hard to know if protests like that build support, strengthen the resolve of those already converted. The flip side is that you can end up with direct action turning into evidence for a culture war, and that's really damaging. The challenge we have is that nuance is really hard at the moment, and some protests play into the hands of those who want to use disruption to their advantage.
So are there better ways then of actually creating those policy changes?
It's important that people on both sides of the debate have their say, and those that want faster change on climate change could help by supporting renewable energy projects near them, solar farms, wind farms, whatever it might be, especially in planning. It would have an impact and actually help address emissions. But we find it frustrating that people that want to see faster action on climate change do not always stand up and be counted for low carbon energy projects.
So this is people basically just reacting negatively. What we should be doing is encouraging people to react positively to change.
That's right.
Well, change though it's always difficult. I mean, what are your top 3 tips for infrastructure professionals, when encouraging this positive reaction to planning projects or policies?
Before I give 3 tips, it's important to recognise that people involved in major projects have a really, really hard job. It's complex. It's not universally understood or popular. They have timeline, budget, planning, construction issues to navigate. But there are a few things that we can talk about. Firstly, talk to people when you have nothing to say. Too often we wait until all the details are sorted, and rarely do we talk to people about the big picture issues and try and build relationships before we get to a red line boundary. You can't build meaningful relationships when you have details on the table. So talk and listen, not just consult. Secondly, empathy. Put yourselves in the shoes of an audience. If you're doing it properly, it should be slightly uncomfortable. Public opinion is a risk to your project, and if you don't understand that risk, it's only going to get worse. And thirdly, prepare for unpredictability. Once projects go out into the world, we're dealing with emotion, we're not dealing with logic anymore. And it's hard to know exactly how people will react to projects, and human nature means that people will throw in curveballs. The more we have a fixed idea of how things will be and stick to it, the more we'll disappoint external stakeholders and probably ourselves as well. So planning for change is critically important.
Okay. Well, Martin, sum it up for me then. I mean, we're living in a very polarised society, but in a time when, like never before, we really need to take difficult, subjective decisions. I mean, how can this be achieved?
What we can do is listen to people that do want to see progress, as well as listen to people that don't want change. And a polarised society is nothing new. There's always been people that support and oppose ideas or projects, and the majority who probably don't care because they're not engaged. So we can overemphasise how polarised we are and ask ourselves the question, are we doing enough to deal with the middle, the people that just need a bit of help to engage a bit further?
Right. So there's one thing that you could change tomorrow to increase that public understanding of an engagement with the infrastructure investment. I mean, what might that one thing be?
In the short term, I'd like government to treat us like adults. We do have change to go through. We also need to give people that are concerned with this time to accept that change. Saying you don't have to have the change is a problem. It's going to leave people disappointed. I'd be more honest and open with the public about their role in planning. I think too much is unintentionally promised at public consultation, and the public feels that we will deliver too little when it happens. We could balance this with much better campaigns that explain the benefits of why infrastructure is needed to more people. I think we would go some way to achieving nuance in public awareness if public awareness was greater. Lastly, promoters have an opportunity to build up a better picture of what we mean by community. If we do that, we can lead to a more pluralised conversation with more members of the public.
Okay. Martin, it's a hugely interesting, really, really important subject and vastly complicated. So thanks so much for joining me today on the Infrastructure Podcast and sharing your thoughts about what we could potentially do to ease the flow of projects and I suppose get rid of some of the really kind of polarised debates that we're enmeshed in. So thanks for joining me today on the podcast.
Thanks, Anthony. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Great. Well, that's all we've got time for today. I hope you enjoyed that podcast, but we've got more from the Infrastructure Podcast in the pipeline and more guests to talk to as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website. That's www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you will find background information to this podcast and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. And of course, do subscribe to receive the new infrastructure newsletter. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again to Martin, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.